Ladies and gentlemen, it's my very pleasant task to welcome you all here to the Open University and to Professor Michael Saward's inaugural lecture. It's a special pleasure to welcome Professor Saward's parents who've come all the way from Tasmania to be here. Really, really nice that you could do that, and to his family and friends. Mike was born and brought up in Tasmania, and he came to England to do his PhD at Essex, and he never left. He worked at Royal Holloway, and he joined us as a professor in 2000. He's now head of department in politics and international studies and co-director of the Centre for Citizenship, Identities and Governance. Since joining the OU, he has played a key role in shaping the dynamic research and teaching culture, both in his faculty and more broadly in the social sciences faculty. His research interests focus on how key political ideas change over time and how they are worked out in practice. He has written extensively about contemporary ideas of democracy, his most recent work being a 4-volume collection entitled Democracy, Critical Concepts in Political Sciences, and that will be published later this year. In his work on representation and citizenship, Professor Saward is setting a new agenda in the field. In the Centre for Citizenship, Identities and Governance, he and his colleagues are centering their work on the idea of the good citizen. For those of you who are interested in hearing more about the work of the Centre, Professor Saward is co-directing a series of ESRC seminars entitled Good Citizen, starting in October this year. Citizenship, I have to say, is a topic very dear to my heart and will no doubt strike a chord in many of you here as well. Only last year I joined with the heads of 27 other universities from 22 different countries to sign a declaration dubbed the Tawa Declaration to renew our commitment to the civic roles and social responsibilities carried by universities everywhere. During Professor Saward's time at the Open University, he and his colleagues have worked hard to develop innovative methods for teaching political theory, to highlight its relevance to the real world, and to energise and engage new students. One of their approaches is to use themes or zones of contestation, as Professor Saward has described them, rather than questions with answers. The title of Professor Saward's lecture is Doing Theory, Political Representation. I'm sure you join me in looking forward to hearing his views on political representation and who has the right to speak for us in political matters. I invite Professor Saward to speak to us. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you very much, Vice-Chancellor, for the generous introduction. Welcome, everyone who's come along, family, friends and colleagues. It's very nice to see you all. I'm especially pleased that my parents, Jim and Rilla Saward, have been able to make the 12,000-mile journey to be here, or is it 13,000? I doubt very much I can deliver a talk to satisfy that level of commitment. But I do know that for me, the most pleasing thing about this whole occasion is the fact that my parents are here to share it. I probably should have been up here doing this sooner, having been an OU professor for a little while now. I was often reminded of the old line by the writer Douglas Adams. He said, "I love deadlines. I especially love the whooshing sound they make as they go by." At some point early in an inaugural lecture, it's customary to say something along the lines of, "How did I get here?" I'll avoid the usual joke about out the back. The short answer is from Tasmania via London, and both places have left their marks. And by the way, I invite you to join my boycott of any product displaying a map of Australia which mysteriously omits my home state. There are a few around, more than you might imagine. Tasmanians are a pragmatic lot, sceptical of high-flown arguments, and that's a good thing to carry with you. Along the way, I've been fortunate enough to play a part in some interesting debates about political ideas. I played a role in helping to shake up green thinking about democracy in the early 1990s, to some extent, and in disputing the prevailing idea then that the state was hollowing out and was on its way to being finished. Alongside others, I wrote about how minimum education and healthcare standards were crucial to democracy and helped to set out a path beyond thinking of democracy in terms of models which never spoke to each other. And that's a project that I want to continue with next year. At the moment, I'm enjoying being part of some lively international debates about how we might rethink representation, and one or two other people are involved in those debates, I'm pleased to say, are here in the audience. So over the years, there have been various books, articles, consultancies, conference directorships, editorships, and some very enjoyable teaching. First at Royal Holloway, University of London, and then in its very different style of teaching here at the OU. Now, I'm proud of many of these things, though just reading that last sentence makes me exhausted. Even more of them, though, I look at and think, can do better. Beyond that, as far as I'm concerned, I'm really only beginning a journey that I'm very lucky to be on at all, and a great many challenges remain. On my way, I've made good choices and I've made mistakes in work and in life. And on both sides, I'm now happy to be looking forward. Where the work's concerned, what's yet to come interests me more than what I've done so far. Though I'll show you the cover of my most recent book, well, because I like the cover, as well as being pleased by some of the content. You can't really tell from that, but it's a close-up of a certain kind of leaf. The fact that I make that comment will confirm my partner Sarah's suspicion that I do judge books by their covers. So I'm going to talk to you about representation. It's a slippery word and it's a slippery idea which links politics, art and performance. Or at least it should link those things. Making the links is part of my point. It's dangerous for anyone in academia to say they're writing a new book. Every corridor conversation after involves the question, so how's the book? I have to get the t-shirt printed saying, think it if you like, just don't ask. But I take the risk. I hope to finish a new book on political representation next year. There are plenty of things I've yet to explore under that heading, but a line from one prominent media figure captures some of the things that I want to deal with briefly this evening and which play a small part in the book. So last year, in the context of the push by the Make Poverty History campaign, the lead singer of the Irish band U2 and political activist Bono said, "I represent a lot of people in Africa who have no voice at all. They haven't asked me to represent them," he said. "It's cheeky, but I hope they're glad I do." In all societies, especially more or less open, more or less pluralist ones like the UK, people who are not elected often claim to be political representatives. Interest group leaders, activists, spiritual figures, and others. So the question is, can claims like Bono's, ever be accepted as legitimate in a democracy? How can we know? And just behind those questions, more generally, who, if anyone, really speaks for you or for me? Now, today, as we're aware, many interests, issues and demands cross national boundaries. Climate change, AIDS, terror and security on the larger scale, and more personally, what we eat, wear, watch and read and how we travel. These are not just national, local or personal issues. Many political and civil society groups, along with private corporations, organise and operate regionally and globally, as well as within single countries. So the impact of our actions and those of our governments and homegrown companies can stretch far beyond our national borders. So in that world, with those changes, who speaks for, who can represent our interests and those of others, is a tricky and important question, as Bono acknowledges. So what interests me, or one of the things that interests me, is that through developments in the real world like these, the reality of representation is being shaken up. But our ideas and theories of representation have not really kept up with that process. So straightforward ideas telling us that representation means one-to-one representation of electoral constituencies by elected officials look a bit crude, sometimes perhaps even outdated. So I think theories of representation need a good shake-up as well, if we're to try to make sense of the fast-changing political world around us.